Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video here on EternalTitans.com. While I'm still in the midst of my Defiance set review, I wanted to share the other ETS World deck that our team was playing. Tobbo won the whole thing with this. I misspoke in the last video and mixed up Tobbo and ManuS deck. So since people really seem to like the background on this and the slightly updated version, I want to do the same here, provide you with a updated version for the new set, for the kind of obvious changes that I see, and just give you some background and show you how the deck plays out. It's been quite some time since I updated the whole Rakano Rebellion thing, but now it's finally back, so let's take a look. Okay, so first off, a bit backstory here. So the deck basically goes back to an idea of rrbbTT, which kinda was loosely inspired by a Rakano Granite deck that Grimfan has been sharing in our Discord at the time and kinda messed around with on stream as well. It was basically like going back to this like Rakano combustion cell ramp thing, now more consistent thanks to Yushkov. So that was like the first deck that made good use of Yushkov as a ramp unit, more so than the like anti-charge thing. And well, the deck looked pretty cool and was quite interesting. It performed so-so, so I kinda wasn't that intrigued by it, but I really liked the idea and the direction that Grimfan was going, but ultimately it felt like it still didn't make the deck good enough in the end to be like have the potential for a top deck. So I didn't play it too much, and then rrbbTT just kind of came up with a more individual card quality based closer to the like traditional Rakano Valkyrie style deck that also used Bulletshaper and Yushkov, but no combustion cell and Granite shenanigans, just more individually good cards as we are used to. And that looked pretty good, and since I liked the core idea of what Grimfan's deck was doing, I was immediately interested. And then basically from there, rrbbTT, Patrick Dickmann, aka Ophelia, and myself kind of committed to that in the week before the first ECQ and tuned the deck from there and worked on it. rrbbTT still had like the package of Groundwatch Press Gang that was really cool in Grimfan's deck, except with Pyronite instead of Granite Drone, but that ended up just being a bit too many slots, and drawing Pyronite without Groundwatch Press Gang was quite bad. It was great to get with Press Gang for free, but drawing it naturally was just not very good because it's a pretty low impact card in a deck like this that isn't very aggressive and doesn't have the tools to keep it attacking and stuff. So yeah, we turned more and more towards the robust Rakano Valkyrie style deck that it is now, and yeah, basically went back to Amilli over Press Gang and that sort of stuff, since the deck definitely needed some kind of beefy mid-game stuff, and I wanted some payoff for Bulletshaper on turn 3 and that sort of stuff. Amilli has its issues. It's particularly bad into the 2-cost removal like Vanquish and Annihilate and stuff, and there was a fair share of those, but the thing is the deck had quite a bunch of cards for that anyway, and so you kinda wanna overtax those, and also there are matchups that don't have that many answers to it, and then just dropping like a turn 3 Amilli can get you pretty far, and even if they deal with it, you play a turn 4 Yushkov, and then turn 5 you can play like a Rizahn or a Telut off of that, and they impossibly can have answers for all of this, so the more big must answer stuff you throw at them, the more likely one's gonna stick, basically. So that's how we got there, and yeah, then Patrick and I came up with Flame Blast because the deck ramped into a whole lot with Telut, but you didn't really do anything with the ramp, and the deck had a bit of an issue potentially closing out games against very grindy mid-range decks or control decks. And Flame Blast does a great job there. It gives you good use for all the power you get from Telut and other ramp. It also happens to be a spell for Bulletshaper, which is relevant. And it also isn't terrible when you don't have a ton of power because it's still an okay removal against stuff. I even sometimes went like against aggro, Bulletshaper activated the same turn and Flame Blast like an Oni Ronin for 2 power with the Flame Blast and stuff like that. And these used to be, well, actually I'll go through the list. So the main difference, aside from like the newly added Defiance cards, was that Tobbo apparently didn't like Flame Blast and replaced them with Auric Runehammer from what I remember, and he didn't really share with me why he did that and why he didn't like it. I'm not sure that's a good choice because the deck definitely had a spell issue before and we wanted to have as many spells as we can because it is very important against aggressive decks that Rizahn has lifesteal, and that was still tricky even with the Flame Blast, so if you cut them it's going to be even harder, and the aggro matchup often came down to Rizahn needing to have lifesteal, and if it doesn't, because this is a Runehammer and not a spell, then you might just lose because of that. Sometimes just ramping with Bulletshaper is also very important. And then even generating card disadvantage to ramp out something earlier can make or break you. So yeah, we unfortunately didn't do that well in the ECQ with it. The deck had its issues against Skycrack and the super mid-range heavy, Aegis heavy Fel mid-range decks, and we ended up running into too many of these and lost together with some unlucky close games against Scream, which was a fine matchup but not a great one. You have your typical Bulletsapers and Valkyries, like baby Icarias, just to like ramp you, and they're also just very good units that do a solid job at attacking or blocking. Icaria turns into a nice threat later, buffs the other Valkyries in the deck in the process, generates card advantage, and so on and so forth. Just an overall great unit for a deck like this. Then we have the 4 merchants. These of course used to be Xtune merchants. Now with the new set, since the only non-black market card in the market was a Rizahn, I wanted to try the Smugglers because it opens up some nice opportunities. We still have Boar. We had Signal Flare for like before, because the deck really wanted more help against aggro, especially Scream and Skycrack, and Signal Flare kills almost everything they have, which basically allowed you to go turn 4, Xtune Merchant, get Signal Flare and kill something, basically a mini Rizahn, which is actually very good in this matchup. And now we got an upgrade of Signal Flare into Defiance thanks to the Red Canyon Smuggler, which should be even better across the board since it is a defensive slot anyway. So the fact that it only works on attacking units is not that big of a deal, but the massive increase of what it can kill is a pretty big upside. So this is a nice tool here. Then we still have the Cookbook. This is not really a deck for Cookbook in the main. You want to be power efficient, you don't have sweepers to catch up from behind, so you don't want to like be dirtling this hard. But there are games and situations where this is one of your best cards and then you can just get it with your merchant. That's perfect. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather still. And then I added a Vanquisher's Blade to the market. We had 2 of these in the main instead of the Avigraft, but now we got Avigraft, and I feel like Avigraft is a bit better main deck card than Vanquisher's Blade because it's a bit more universal, it's a bit more efficient. And also currently there's not that much need for Void Suppression, plus the Avigraft also does a bit of that suppression against Haunting Scream targets if you hit their key units with it. So yeah, one Vanquish's Blade in the market, just as a removal for big guys, and also for the potential relevant Void Bound. And then we wanted like one kind of big threat. This used to be like basically one of these removal slots, like the Vanquish's Blade used to be Rizahn, and this used to be a big threat slot. It has been big Icaria or Flame Blast for most of the time we played the deck, but sort of the Sky King seems like an even better option. So we have the Flame Blast in the main, and sort of Sky King is a bit more offense-defense type thing. It also can effectively serve as a gain 8 health to stabilize in longer games against pressure. It's particularly obnoxious for control decks to deal with, so all in all, I like this as an option now that we have a Rakano colored merchant that can get red and green cards. And then yeah, we have the 4 Enforcer for Yushkov. Yushkov is at its best in this deck basically because all of his text really matters. The exhaust effect helps you when you are being the aggressor. It helps you against charge heavy decks like Haunting Scream and the card Haunting Scream specifically. It also happens to help against Aegis because once you have Yushkov out, all the Aegis threats the opponent plays will immediately get their Aegis popped, making them much easier to deal with removal, which is actually a pretty big deal because these types of decks usually have quite some issues with Aegis, as I mentioned, for example, against the Aegis heavy Faln decks. And then of course we have the ramp. The ideal scenario is that you jump from 4 to 7 and drop a Telut on turn 5, which is super powerful, especially because Telut then ramps you himself, so you can just play another Telut or whatever, like sort of the Sky King from your market on turn 6, even without the ultimate of Yushkov anymore, which is super powerful. Then we have Amilli. We were like going back and forth between 3 and 4 Amilli, and now I went back to 3 Amilli to fit the 4th Rizahn. That is no longer in the market and needed to go back to the main, and that was the card that I felt like we could cut the most. And then we have the 4 Telut. This is part of what makes the deck tick. The fact that you have a high impact top end threat that has immediate impact. This deck almost always has a unit in play, so you can always immediately attack, and then its effect, especially the -1/-1 attack on opposing units, is very obnoxious and makes it so the opponent usually can't even gank block very well, and from there on it's only getting worse and it's just crippling their board, so they don't really have any hope of blocking or raising much, and they immediately need to deal with Telut or it's gonna get worse. And in the process we get to ramp to 2 more Justice, making our Flame Blast good, letting us play our sword and play more Teluts even if we only had like 4 power with a Yushkov. Yeah, and then we have the removal, the Vanquish's Blade that turned into Avigraft. Seems like a decent upgrade, but don't go crazy on this card. The card is still clunky at 3 cost. It's basically like Slay, except overall it's worse than Slay, since it doesn't kill flyers, like big flyers like So, for example, which is pretty relevant, or Rizahn, to name some examples. And Boar is a very universal market card in a lot of decks. So them just, while they blow up other stuff, blowing up Avigrafts for free and getting 3/3 Valkyries is a pretty big deal. And the line that the cursed player can't play units with that name is pretty trivial. It can come in handy and can be a nice bonus, but it's nothing to write home about. So yeah, Vanquish is still a much better card because it's cheaper, it's more reliable, doesn't have any downside, can kill anything that matters, unlike Avigraft, which, like I said, can't hit some of the good flyers, for example. Hence, still max out on Vanquish before touching Avigraft in a deck like this, and also Avigraft is a relic, so you can't ditch it to Bulletshaper. It won't help your Rizahn get lifesteal. As I mentioned, this is also pretty relevant. And it's a relic, so it will be blocked by Face Aegis, which is something this deck is not that great at dealing with. So having your removal not work because your opponent happens to have a phased Aegis is a pretty big downside. So this is definitely a worse Slay. And let's face it, Slay is not a great card. Slay is a fine card, it's a necessary card, mostly because it's flexible, but paying 3 for a spot removal spell is about as much as you can afford and is already often borderline too much. So having a worse Slay for the same cost, definitely nothing to get excited about, but it's better than nothing in a color combination that doesn't have better options. But if you have better options, you should play other stuff. Like playing Avigraft in FJS, in my opinion, is just, there's no excuse for doing that. You have so much better cards to do the job, that have no downside, that are more flexible, more versatile, and more efficient. And yeah, then we have 4 Seek and 4 Privilege as additional power. This might seem a lot given that we have Bulletshaper, Baby Icaria, and Yushkov, and even at the top end Telut to generate power for us, but we tried the deck with 1 or 2 power less, and it just felt miserable every time. It's just very important to hit your power drops, and a lot of the time your Bulletsapers and Yushkovs will die, so you need to have 7 power by turn 7, and the only way to get that is play enough power. And with this amount of power, the deck actually felt pretty smooth and consistent. So yeah, don't be greedy, play enough power. Also, power works pretty well. We have merchants here to get rid of spare power, we have Flame Blast and Telut and stuff to make use of extra power, and we also have power in spell form that we can discard to Bulletshaper to accelerate ourselves if we happen to draw more than we need for regular power drops. And then we have 4 Torch and 4 Vanquish, just your typical 4-off removal. Some of the best spells in these colors, and the 2 Flame Blast that I mentioned as additional payoff for all the ramp and finishers. And then we have 25 power, 12 duels, as many Granite Waystones as we could realistically support, since they both are pretty good with Telut, just to have a body in play. Sometimes you just play a Granite in to set up a Telut next turn, or to feed the Granite into the merchant for free, which is great, and you really don't need the 3rd fire. You have plenty of ways to get the 3rd fire for Yushkov by Bulletsapering and Seek Power and so on, and the duels. Having 2 fire sigils to fetch should almost always be enough. You should rarely get into a situation where you need to seek power for a 3rd fire sigil and you can't. Yeah, that's the deck list. Some nice updates. It's hard to tell yet how good the deck is gonna be in the new format going forward, but here you at least have an updated version to try for yourself and see how much you like it and how well it's doing for you. It's definitely, it should at least be solid, since it plays a lot of powerful cards. It's very consistent in 2 colors. It does a bunch of unfair things, cheating on power with Bulletshaper and Yushkov. And Telut is very strong against any deck that relies on the board, which most Eternal decks do. And yeah, we got a bunch of nice upgrades as well, so there's no reason the deck shouldn't at least be able to keep up with a lot of decks, especially in these early days where there are a lot of random decks and unrefined lists running around. So if you want to play something more stable and refined, give this a try with the updates and see how it serves you. Alright, that's it for the deck list. As usual, we're gonna hop into some games in the top 100 of Ranked in a moment to show you how it does in the current format. And before we do, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, including the remaining parts of the set review. We're going to start with Justice later today. And of course, check out my social media and live stream over here on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also find the info in the description. And if you want to further support us, please consider whitelisting EternalTitans.com and YouTube in your ad block to help support the free content. That would really mean a lot to us. And now on to the games. See you in a moment.